those are the attack on America, the civil rights movement, the facts of my death. Didn't I cry on that one?
Yeah, that was a crying video, the facts of my death. Yeah. No, I was just wondering.
I mean, yeah, I could.
You know, making some statements in terms of.
Didn't I do the Soviet Union, the USSR last time?
Yeah, and the red
decade.
Yeah,
The attack on America.
Not to mention the slave items that you've done, and you know.
American slavery, Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad.
So you want to not mention none of those?
I mean, I could.
Yeah, that first section. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Black Panther Party. And we have with us to talk about the Black Panther Party, Alana McLaughlin. As a matter of fact, many of you know Alana from a long, long time ago. And instead of asking her background, education, and experiences, we've talked her into making some statements during this first segment, dealing with some of the most notable videos, perhaps that she has been involved in since we started with her more than 8 years ago. And so, Alana, within that framework, make a few statements about who you are, and then talk about some of the videos, some of the shows that we've done, because I think it's in a large number, but do it from that perspective.
Well, Dr. Haney, to give some insight on my background in education, I am an 11th grader at the Nashville School of Arts, where I play trumpet and piano. I am trumpet section leader at Pearl Cone Entertainment Magnet High School, where I am a part of Pearl Cone's Marching Band of Tradition. And in addition to my love for music and family and church, I have been on the show for the past 8 years, with some of my most notable shows being The Attack on America, The Underground Railroad, The Red Decade, The Facts of My Death, Malcolm X, the Soviet Union, and many, many more.
As a matter of fact, just a multitude of shows that we've done, and let me tell you how important they've been in terms of bringing people of your age and category into what we do. Now, I think the topic today is another of those very, very important events in terms of the United States of America, and that is the Black Panther Party. And so I think before we have our first commercial break, why don't you take the first couple of minutes and say something about the topic itself, the Black Panther Party, and then we'll have a break and we'll come back during that second segment and become involved with the Black Panther Party from then until the end of the show. Let's do it from that perspective.
Well, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, commonly known as the Black Panther Party or simply the Panther Party, was a political organization founded by Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton in 1966 in West Oakland, California. Now, this organization was founded initially to patrol African-American neighborhoods to protect its residents from police brutality. And over the next two segments, we'll start to understand what police brutality really was, why it was such a problem in 1960s America, and what the party did to help combat this issue and the lasting impact that they've had on the United States and especially the African-American community. The Panther Party was known for being portrayed as a gang. And even today, the new Panther Party is classified as a hate group, as a terrorist group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. But again, we will dive further into this over the next two segments. But I want to kind of change the view of the Panther Party with this show. And I want to show a lot of people who are not familiar with the party that it was not the hate group and the terrorist extremist group that lots of people make it out to be.
And so in a real sense, we're going to get a real reinterpretation of the Black Panther Party, even though we've done quite a bit in reference to the Black Panther Party prior to this time. And I think I can appreciate some of the information that you're bringing to us in reference to this, because not only a large number of people might not be familiar with the Black Panther Party, and I think by you indicating an interest in the Black Panther Party, as well as some of the other titles that you've done with this show over the last 8 years being with us. And as you indicated, I had an opportunity this year to watch The Attack on America. And that was I think, the first show that you did with us. And I think that at the time, it did represent one of the most important videos that you've done with us. And so that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to sort of highlight you during this particular segment so that when we come back, we can talk about the Black Panther Party. And our audience will recognize that it is within that framework, with all of these other videos that you've talked about, all of them that have appeared on the internet and et cetera, that it's within that background that we want you to talk about the Black Panther Party and whatever else you want to add to that. And so we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's giving us some information in reference to the Black Panther Party. And so, Alana, within this section or segment, let's start off talking about the Black Panther Party from your perspective.
Well, for our viewers just tuning in the last segment, we basically explained what the Black Panther Party was, and the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was a political organization founded in 1966 in West Oakland, California, whose initial purpose was to patrol African-American neighborhoods so to protect their residents from police brutality. Now, police brutality, well, to understand the full extent of the Panther Party, we have to ask ourselves, what is police brutality? Police brutality is kind of an umbrella term for the abuse of power by officers of the law. While when most people hear police brutality, they think physical, Rodney King-esque type events, it's not all physical. Police brutality can involve mental abuse, verbal abuse, murder, and even things like planting drugs on people and things of the sort. And so, thinking back to 1960s America, it wasn't idyllic, at least not for African Americans. In 1960s America, a big event happened, which would be the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, this outlawed the discrimination of people based on race, color, gender, and religion, and other things. And also, this outlawed the segregation of public accommodations, so like movie theaters, malls, and schools, which was a big one. This is when desegregation started to occur. And so in 1964, this was an important year for African Americans. It was a great year for us. But this act did strike a nerve with with many white Americans, especially those in the Deep South. And if you're familiar with American history, you know that the Deep South has a long history with the political and economic mistreatment of Africans and African Americans dating back to the 7th century in Jamestown, Virginia. With that being said, lots of white Americans were not pleased by the fact that they were going to start to have to actually interact with black people and treat them with some level of dignity. Now, police brutality definitely increased, well, I wouldn't say increased, but became more prevalent after this act because it was the racist form of fighting back against this act. And the Black Panther Party saw this and wanted a way to peacefully fight back with this. Now, over the next few minutes of the show, you'll learn that, or we'll learn, that lots and lots of people, with white Americans especially, thought that the Black Panther Party was a terrorist group or a hate group. And even today, in 2018, the new Black Panther Party, which is not affiliated with the one from 1966, is classified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. With this being said, the Black Panther Party wanted to fight to get black people in office. They wanted to arm black people, and they wanted housing, jobs, and justice for all. They did this peacefully for the most part. Now, the Black Panther Party did have a few run-ins with police, with founder Huey P. Newton actually being accused of killing an Oakland police officer, where he was originally sentenced to anywhere between 2 to 15 years, but eventually got that overturned. And also, the group's newspaper editor and a young Black Panther also had a run-in with police where said young Panther was killed and 2 other officers were wounded. This left a nasty mark on the reputation of the Black Panther Party, which kind of assisted in how they were viewed and portrayed in American history. You can even find in some textbooks that they are still called a hate group and a terrorist group, though that was not their intentions. Their intentions were the betterment of African Americans, very similar to the NAACP, which is the Association for the Advancement of Colored People. These groups, though very different, had the same goal in mind, the advancement of colored people, fighting for justice for black people who have been torn down, mistreated, killed, unfairly tried over the course of American history. And so the Black Panther Party, in doing all of this, fought, but they died off around the end of the 60s and 70s because lots of drama occurred both within the group and with the group and the FBI. There were lots of investigations, and over time, the group slowly started to kind of fade off. But the group's entrepreneurship and the lasting effect that the group had on the United States is just, it's astonishing. The things that they did and the things that they fought for so fearlessly are just so inspiring. And I believe that young people, especially my generation, should know about this pivotal group because they are a big part of the reason why we fight the way we do and why we have this fire burning in us to want better for ourselves in a country that is designed against us, in a country that doesn't take us into play, in a country that doesn't mention us in the Constitution. Young people should, I believe, take from the Black Panther Party and take from what they did and bring it back to life.
Very good. Over the last minute we have here, Alana, Africans are mentioned in the Constitution, but it's mentioned as a 3/5 compromise, which means the representation in the United States Senate and the House would be based upon 3/5 of the slave population, and slaves were not allowed to vote, 3/5 of the slave population when counting the number of representatives and electorals that the South would be able to receive. And so, yeah, they were mentioned in the Constitution, but they were mentioned to such a point that they were almost excluded and pinned down in such a place that it would be impossible for them to get out of over the next almost 200 years. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. Now, Alana, during this last segment, we recognize that you're not old enough to vote, but we've had enough shows dealing with the suffrage on this particular show to give you some idea of the need that African Americans have in terms of the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments to the Constitution and why they must vote. Why should people in your age category who might not be able to vote yet, but there are people just a couple of years over you that will have an opportunity to vote. Say something about the voting experience to them this morning.
Well, in reference to the Black Panther Party, voting was a big, big thing for the political organization. Initially, after patrolling African-American neighborhoods so that they wouldn't be plagued with police brutality, another big view included in their 10-point program, which kind of outlined the philosophies of the Black Panther Party, which I encourage our viewers to look at and make their own opinions of. The Black Panther Party really, really, really wanted to get African-Americans into office. They wanted to get them into politics. And relating to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which are summarized as the freedom of slaves, the right to citizenship, and the right to vote, these amendments play a pivotal role in modern day America because we now have the right to vote. And we need to utilize this right because our votes do count. God, I've heard so many times that either the election is rigged or that black votes don't count, or I've just heard people say specifically that their vote doesn't count, and all three statements are false. Every vote counts, and even if you don't believe that it counts, you should still want to voice your opinion because it's not often that you see a country that actually lets its people voice their own opinions freely without persecution and lets us actually have a hand in the way that the political world is spun around us. With that being said, everyone should get out and vote, but especially African Americans, because our people fought so long and hard for this right that it would be ignorant of us not to utilize it. Our ancestors, our great-grandparents, their great-grandparents dreamed of being able to vote. And now we have this luxury, and not using it is just almost like a disgrace to the people who broke their backs protesting, fighting to vote, fighting to let their voice be heard in a country that is not listening to us. Not listening to us, like the president focusing on someone kneeling and not focusing on why this person is kneeling, and then slandering a company for using said person kneeling, which was Colin Kaepernick, and still not recognizing why people are kneeling in the first place. This is what I mean when I say that this is a country that is not listening to African Americans, that is not listening to our cries for help when we're killed by the police, when we're unfairly tried in courts, when we're incarcerated for crimes that we didn't commit. All these things and all these injustices towards us should make us want to vote more, should make us want to be in office more, should make us want to be more lawyers and more prosecutors, and make us want to go to the Supreme Court and all this, while still utilizing amazing jobs like football players and athletes and models and celebrities. We just need to see more African Americans in the political world. When you look at the White House right now, how many senior White House executives are there? None. Omarosa was the last one. She's gone. There's none. When you think of black people who have had an outspoken say in politics in the last 8 years, you think of former President Barack Obama and his amazing family. And then B, you think of Ben Carson. And that's it. And it's sad that I can only name 3 black people who have had an outspoken and undeniable, who have left their footprint on the White House. Why only 3 people when African Americans make up more than 3% of the United States? We are a large group in this country. Why is it that we are not being represented? Why is it that more laws condemning brutality against us, why aren't there any? Again, with all this being said, we need to change the face of the political world, and we need to change the face of the United States. And it starts with my generation. We have our tool belt is filled with tools to use to be able to change the world politically, economically, socially. We could do it, but it all starts with one simple thing: voting.
The right to vote, and that's the most important thing in reference to whatever we might be able to do, Alana. And let me, Alana, say that we've been very, very impressed by the way that, excuse me, you are able to handle this information. But now, what about people in the 11th grade at your school, in the 12th grade, and et cetera? Are they as conscious, both black and white and whatever else, color, whatever race, are they as conscious of the importance of the suffrage as perhaps you are indicating that you might be at this particular point? And do you think that even though they might not be able to go out themselves and cast a vote, you don't have to be of age in order to persist and help in any kind of political campaign? Do you find that being something that is knowledgeable among most of them, being involved in phone banks and other kinds of things that they might be able to help in terms of the political process?
To answer the beginning of your question, when you ask, do I think that they're conscious of how big of a deal this is? No, I don't. I do not think that the average junior or senior in high school or even freshman in college is aware of just how important all of this is, politics and all that. I don't think that that's something that the average person really grips until maybe the end of high school towards the beginning of college, where you're exposed to a bigger group of people and they'll probably prompt you to vote. I think that I am at a very, very good place knowledge-wise because of the fact that I have parents who have worked with politics and who understand this, shout out to you, and who have encouraged me to always utilize the rights that my ancestors fought for. To answer the second part of your question, no, juniors and seniors, unless you're 18, cannot vote, but the smallest thing that you could do that could change the face of the political world before you're even 18 years, encourage your family members to vote. I'm sure we all know at least one person who has said that their vote doesn't count, or they're not gonna vote, or they don't feel like voting, or they don't have a ride to go vote. We could change little things like that, and it would make a world of difference. It would make the largest impact. Simply filling up your 4-seater with 3 people who can vote, even if you're under 18, that's 3 more votes. Filling it up with 3 African Americans who didn't have a way to vote or didn't plan on voting, that's putting us further into the political world. And that's what the Black Panther Party fought for. They wanted to see more African Americans in office because, again, there are not many black people in the White House. There's not many black people in American politics. There's been one African American president out of almost 50, only one. And you have to stop and ask yourself, it's not that black people are less educated. It's not that there's no black people in the country. It's not like there's not a million educated, smart, strong, cunning black people to choose from. It's the fact that this stereotype that black people can't or black people won't has been embedded in the minds of so many white Americans. And though in 2018 we're in a place where a lot of people don't realize that, we still need to change this stereotype.
Okay, Alana, let me thank you over the last half minute dealing with this, because what we attempted to try to do was to bring all of that information out. And I think that in a real sense, you laid down a good foundation for any young person your age or above who might hear this particular show to understand the importance of the suffrage. And I think that that was my intention today. And let me thank you for helping to bring that about. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. in terms of some of the issues
Okay.
dealing with our young people today. And
Okay.
Alana will be able to buy into that after she'll listen.
Okay.
Yeah, we need another chair. She's gonna, yeah. Yeah, we
You
want to
started
put
filming when you
put
was
Alana
like,
between the,
8? You started when you was about 8 up here?
yeah, put you in the middle here, Alana. Mhm. And that way we can run this up until Dr. Baldwin, because I think he's supposed to come here at 12:15, right? Sometimes, yeah. And this will.
Not too far over.
I don't know. Wait a minute. Let's just see. Okay, hook her up again and. Let's call this Challenges of African American Youth.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, and by calling it Challenges of African American Youth, we can
like
start
that,
off
right?
with you and talk about some of the challenges and
Okay.
et cetera, and let Alana bring in and et cetera. You hear that, Alana? Challenges of African American youth. Some of the challenges of African American youth. Do you know some of the challenges of African American youth? Some of the things that,
Discrimination.
you know, whatever.
We're statistically, God, I could go on for days.
Well, just do it for 30 minutes here. You don't have to do it for days.
So we're talking about you specifically. So like,
Youth of distinction, no, challenges of African American youth. You know, young people
Stuff
your
you go
age.
through.
And what are some of the issues that you have to face living in society today? And
discrimination is number one, and then the stigma of depression and anxiety in the African American community is number two.
do you think so?
The fact that black kids, a majority of the time, to rephrase that, if we have a white student or just not a person of color in a classroom, right? And he has like an anxiety attack, falls out, start crying, whatever. They get him checked out. He's diagnosed with anxiety. They get him medicine. Black kid does the same thing. Either A, should I do it again?
It's like in our community, talking about stuff like that is a big stigma. Like trying to go home and be like, I feel like I have depression, or I feel like it's either A, we're being over dramatic, or B, pray. And while prayer does work by far, medicine is also needed a lot of times. And a lot of kids can't get that.
Pastor, we're going to start with you. And the name of the show is Challenges of African American Youth.
Okay.
And then we're going to introduce you and have you to introduce yourself. And then Alana, background, education, experience, both of y'all do the same thing. You deal with, and what we want to try to do is use 6 minutes to get out of this particular segment. And then when we come back to the second segment, then we ought to be able to come up with some other challenges.
Okay.
And, everything from the criminal justice system to child support or whatever they said, anything that generally crosses your mind.
Yeah.
And real sense, those are some of the challenges that our young people have to face.
I'm just going with whatever y'all do.
Huh?
I'm just.
Oh, so hit my vest. Put my vest down.
You lost your mic.
Put the mic on.
Oh, it fell off.
No. We don't want it on the vest.
Oh, you don't want it on the vest? Keep this car from showing.
And I'm going to have the pastor give us some information about his background, situation, et cetera. And the
So
idea
the
here is that
segments are 6, 8, 10, right?
yes, yeah, and this is 6-minute segment. And so
Then 8 and
we
10.
want to try to use all 6 of these minutes. in
Oh,
this
we
particular
will.
segment.
Between us 3, we will.
Yeah, it'll be easy for her right there. Everything straight?
Yeah, we just said that.
All right.
Looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah, we look nice. Look all dressed up in our Sunday best.
You all ready?
Ready?
They're ready. Stand.
Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic today is the challenges of African American youth. And we're fortunate to have with us to talk about some of the challenges of African American youth, Alana McLaughlin and Pastor Kay Walker. And of course, what we'll do is to have Pastor Walker and Alana give us some information in reference to their background, education, and some of their experiences. And then we will get into the second segment and we'll talk about some of the challenges. Let's start with you, Alana, by having you to give us some information in reference to who you are, and then Pastor Walker will probably end us with this first segment for the morning.
Well, Dr. Haney, I am a junior at the Nashville School of Arts, where I specialize in trumpet and piano. And aside from that, I'm very involved in sports. I am trumpet section leader at Pearl Cone Entertainment Magnet High School in their marching band of tradition. And in addition to my musical dreams and my church work and involvement in my family, I've been involved with the show for the past 8 years, I believe. And yeah.
Very good. And of course, Pastor Walker, why don't you give us some information? I think Alana had to cut it short because she's talking about this all of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about you. And you as well have talked about this all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Neither of the two of you are any stranger to what we do here or our guests. But make some statements, Pastor Walker, in reference to
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Haney. I'm Pastor Kelvin L. Walker, Associate Pastor, Fairfield Missionary Baptist Church, where Howard E. Jones Jr. is the senior pastor. Born and raised here in Nashville, Tennessee. I think two good parents, that taught me the right way to go. Of course, I didn't always follow instruction, went the wrong way. Had a rough life coming up, really. Drug addiction, crime, imprisonment, incarceration in the state prison system and the like. Spent a little time, Tennessee State University, never completed anything. Edmondson Junior College, didn't complete that. Also did some college studies while incarcerated in the state prison system while I'm down at Turner Center through Tribeca East Campus Prison Program, pursuing the degrees in businesses each time around. First time around in Tennessee State, I was going for clothing and textile. I wanted to become a fashion designer. That was my passion back then. I loved the clothes and loved the dress and stuff like that. But none of that panned out because of my drug addiction. Got addicted to heroin early in life, and it led me down a pathway, man, that led to a lot of destruction. But at the same time, Dr. Haney, God intervened in my life on August 24th, 1986, broke that 17-plus year drug addiction, called me into ministry, and for the last 32 years, that's what I've been doing. I've been a servant to the people and trying to find ways to make better the communities that we live in, make people's situations better, and just trying to be an overall servant to the people and help people out, and kind of brings me to, where we are today, in this topic matter, dealing with the challenges of African-American youth, because, Dr. Haney, everybody knows, or if you don't know, I don't know where you've been, to not know that African-American youth are facing some very serious and some very difficult challenges. And we're always hearing about the negative parts of it. Oftentimes we don't hear, as we heard in Alana's introduction, the positive things that she's doing, and I'm so glad to be here because I've watched her progress, from age 8 doing this show right here on up to today. And, and these are the things, and, you got to tip your hat to you, Dr. Haney, for putting her on the show like that and having, exposing her and exposing society, the community, to African-American youth who are not the ones that they're showing on the TV in the back of police cars with handcuffs on, or being led into the juvenile facilities, or being led into the jailhouse, because that's what we are. That's the only images that we ever see on TV, and that's not all of who we are. That's a part of who we are. We can't deny it, but at the same time, you can't blanketly indict every youth and put that label on every youth out here, and I refuse to sit back and allow that to happen.
You know, Pastor, I think that what you've said about Alana, let me say the same thing about you, because what you've indicated in your background, education, that kind of information, I think that you indicated that a person who has had many, many problems, but in the end, you end up sitting here. Yes. Because what? You've been able to overcome, you see, and all of the challenges that you've been able to overcome, you serve as an example. That's why we want to talk to you.
Yes, sir.
As much as we have an opportunity to do so, because you know the challenges. You've been there, and,
oh, yeah.
And you're able to talk about that within that framework. Now, when we come back, we'll have Alana to deal with some of the issues that she believes that young people are having dealing with her school, some of the communities or whatever, and she'll be able to talk about that, and we'll be able to sort of wrap this show up with the third segment. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin and Pastor Kay Walker, and the topic is challenges of African American youth. And what we'd like to do during this second segment, Alana, is to talk about the impact of some of the issues on African American youth. I think that you've talked quite a bit about the idea of gentrification and some of the other things and how it impacts people who are within your age category and how they have to try to overcome some of the negative impacts in reference to it. Let's do it from that perspective.
Well, teens going astray and going down a wrong path is not something that happens overnight. It's a gradual buildup of things from what I've seen. A lot of times things start at home. Take a very big political problem per se right now, gentrification, which is very prevalent here in Nashville. Gentrification is, well, to summarize gentrification, basically government housing projects or very ethnic neighborhoods are being bought. Homes are being torn down and being replaced with either like apartment complexes or very, very expensive houses, which the previous residents can no longer afford, pushing them out and changing the face of said neighborhood by putting in people who can afford it, people with more money and typically a different skin color, changing the face of that area. Gentrification, a big problem with it is displacement. And I know many people, many friends of mine who have been displaced, which led to lots and lots of negative things in their lives. Once you're displaced, or let's take it back to even before displacement. Say your area is being gentrified, your mother's struggling to pay bills, or your parents are struggling to make ends meet. You can't have all the luxuries that other kids are having. You get out there, you start stealing or doing whatever you can to try to have something to eat or try to have something to wear, which leads you right into the criminal justice system, which leads to a record, which leads to being a felon, and which leads to not being able to get the job that you want when you get older. It's stuff like that, things that start off small that really have an impact on our community, which is why so many people are fighting against gentrification, because a lot of people will argue that it almost kickstarts just a negative way of life, because losing your home is just the beginning. It leads to so many other things that you'll have to do simply to survive, that is inevitable, which is a known fact in our community. And so I truly believe that gentrification is the biggest thing. But secondly, discrimination. I can't tell you how many times I've signed up for an internship, say music-based or something English-based, and I've been beat out by someone who was less qualified than me or had less effort than me, but the only difference was that they were of a different race. And that's a prevalent one in schools, especially. I know that a lot of times there have been opportunities that I was qualified for that I have not received or wasn't even considered for because someone who looked different than me or sounded different than me got it. And I realized that a lot of black kids go through this. I've had so many black friends who are just like, I'm not even gonna go for the internship because I know that so-and-so will beat me out simply because they look like so-and-so and their parents do so-and-so. And that's another thing that we have to change, especially in schools, which is why we need more black teachers in inner city schools who understand what black kids go through at home and understand our community just a little bit more than teachers of different ethnicities. But those are the two big ones that I could think. What about you?
Yeah, Pastor.
You know, when you talk about discrimination, that type of thing, when youth having to face that, you know, take for example, back when President Barack Obama, Senator Barack Obama was running for the office of presidency of the United States of America, man, that was a positive boom going on, not only in the African-American community, but in many other communities, white communities as well, because, you know, anybody with any kind of sense know it took more than just black people to vote Obama into office. It took a great majority of white Americans as well, so we just can't discount that. But at the same time, you know, there was a shot of hope, and when he ascended to that office, I mean, it just raised a level of hope in America. Like, man, we are finally getting to a point where we're actually really moving past, you know, discrimination. Although it still existed, we're still, you make strides, and when you make strides in anything, you know, there's a level of hope that rises up in you and around you. And then after 8 years of what I see as positive growth and everything, because we went from a time, and you're talking about gentrification was not even really a topic matter before Obama got in office, because everything was going into foreclosure, wasn't nobody buying anything because all these bankers are running wild and trapping people in the debts and causing them to lose their properties that way. You know, gentrification wasn't even an issue back then. But after 8 years of positive growth and everything like this, now we got a current administration that has breathed a breath of hatred and cruelty and have stirred up an evil in this society, man, that put youth in a position now where they got to deal with being discriminated against. She just alluded to, I'm applying for a position in spots and stuff like that in school, and then being beat out by somebody that's less qualified when you know that you put the work in, you know that you've done everything necessary to make it happen, and then you get to the point where it should happen and it don't happen. And there's no reason for it not to happen, because based upon her academic record, it should have happened. Based upon her ability, her skills, and her talents, it should have happened. But because they didn't want it to happen, whoever they are, it didn't happen. And now this is the type of discrimination that we're having to face. And then when you talk about gentrification, I can understand, you know, people say, well, you know, when she started talking about gentrification, people probably saying, well, what does gentrification got to do with it? Well, you think about it. Somebody been living in a neighborhood for a long period of time. It may not even been that long for a child, you know, but they're living there. They got their roots there. They're growing up there. And then all of a sudden the family finds out that you've got to move in 30 days. You got to move in 60 days. Then there's a stress that comes up on that family, up on that parent, up on those parents that causes a ripple effect into the youth, because the parents under stress, then automatically that stress going to enter into the household, and it's going to affect the youth as well. Now they're going out here, they're trying to figure out what's going on. Why do I have to move? Then I got to move. There's an uncertainty about where I'm going to, and then it could very well end up. It could very well have been in a place that somebody might look at and say, "Oh, that's not a good neighborhood anyway." But at the same time, it was the best neighborhood for them. And then now they're in a place now because of gentrification. Now they're having to deal with a lot of situations. They may run into a gang situation. Now they're being trying to be recruited by gangs and stuff like that. Then they're facing challenges. They're in a new school system. Now you're the new kid going into a school system you picked on. People don't mess with you.
And of course, we'll take this second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. The topic is challenges of youth and gentrification. And we have with us to talk about this topic, Alana McLaughlin and Pastor Kay Walker. Alana, let's see if we can pick up with you in reference to some of the things that we've already said in reference to the impact that some of the policies that are followed by the city or the local government, the impact that this might have on some of the young people in your school system that you have personal knowledge of, and didn't anybody have to tell you about it, but you had an opportunity to see this for yourself. And so let's do that with you and Pastor Walker over the last 10 minutes of this show.
Being a student in the Metro Nashville school system, I've seen the effects of youth who the system basically left behind. For example, springing off of what Pastor Walker said about gentrification and how a lot of the reason why youth are so negatively depicted in TV and radio and all this, all of that stuff that led them to that very moment right there, it starts so like further back. For instance, while we're talking about gentrification, the uncertainty that comes with losing your home, or just moving to a different place at being young. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about the people who don't have anywhere to move because their neighborhood was gentrified and now it's $100,000 to live in the house that they were getting assistance with in the first place. They're at the mission. Now, said this child or these children have to go to school, and now they're picked on because they don't have the nicest clothes, or they don't always get a chance to do their homework at night, or they don't always get a chance to be able to shower and bathe regularly. Now, the impact of that can go multiple different ways. Kids want to drop out of school because of the bullying and the torment and the fact that I've seen lots and lots of administrators not even bother asking what's going on at home or what can we do to help you, just automatically scolding the child for not doing their work or not asking why they're having these problems. It could go to, say, said child gets into some things that they shouldn't be into. They look for that family, that sense of home in gangs. They'll try to combat the fact that they